Thank you. This is such an honor to be here with author, director for stage and screen, documentarian, and actor Ethan Hawke.
They're making you guys applaud a lot. I appreciate it.
I thought we would just start with a show of hands of who has ever loved something made by Ethan Hawke.
That's very nice. Wow.
I certainly count myself among them. But let's also start with something you love, which I'm from the theater, so I brought a prop. And this is something that's been underneath my record player for years. It's Ella Fitzgerald sings the Rodgers and Hart songbook. And when I pulled it out, you had an immediate response to it too.
Yeah, well, this is how I first started to know about Rodgers and Hart. What's strange about Richard Linklater is when I first met him, he was really into the Butthole Surfers and Black Flag, and he also really liked this album. And he would play this album constantly, particularly during the writing of Before Sunset. He played this album over and over and over again. And then I got to play Chet Baker, and I got to perform some of these very same songs. But this is the voice I think of when I think of Rodgers and Hart and my education about Rodgers and Hart. And when he first gave me this script, I don't think I knew that the Rodgers of Rodgers and Hart was the same Rodgers as Rodgers and Hammerstein. I didn't think I knew that. And so it kind of blew me away. But this is the Rodgers I prefer.
And one of the things that's amazing about this vinyl is that it has introductory essays. And so the Hart tribute is written by Richard Rodgers, and the Rodgers tribute is written by Oscar Hammerstein. And Hammerstein's tribute to Rodgers is about twice the length of the one for Hart. But they're actually also beautiful, and I would encourage people to seek them out, because having now seen this movie, I had read these before, and it had not resonated this way for me.
Well, when we were preparing the movie, there's a old interview with Richard Rodgers. It's in black and white. It's actually beautifully shot. And when asked about Larry, you feel such intense emotion from the interview. He's elated when he's talking about the early days and how much fun they have. And there's a tremendous amount of anger, flashes of guilt and resentment about Larry's passing. Mm-hmm. And it seems he probably would have benefited from an Al-Anon meeting. It's very difficult to be friends with an addict. I think for Rick, this movie is largely about, he always calls it an artistic breakup movie. In that there's a lot of movies about romantic breakups and friendships, but the intimacy involved in an artistic collaboration, especially one that lasts 25 years, is really intense. When you think they wrote over 1,000 songs together, and their whole identity was tied up in each other. Like the movie says, they were on the cover of Time magazine together. They were thought of in the same breath, the way that Lennon and McCartney were for years. And so when this movie ends, it's what I love that the film just centers on this one night, and I think I really am happy with that, but there would be another biopic of Larry Hart that would be heartbreaking, which is after this night, a couple months after this night, he does in fact write 4 songs for Connecticut Yankee. He shows up at the opening night performance so hammered that he won't stop singing and walking up and down the aisles along with the cast, to the point where Richard Rodgers has to ask him to leave. He refuses, and the cops escort him out. And then he drank himself to death. I mean, I think like 3 days later, he drank himself to death. And that's a very operatic ending. But I just mentioned that. I don't know why. To uplift you. But Larry's heartbreaking and beautiful. And I think that what's so interesting to me about this tiny, just taking this night, a portrait of this tiny moment in time, you can feel vibrations coming off of it, of what's before and what's after. The jazz age is ending. Oklahoma, in a way, came to represent America's winning of the war and self-mythologizing of itself, and creating, as Larry says, that's nostalgic for a world that never existed. Oklahoma that's the Indian territory. There's not really, I mean, it's not an accurate portrayal of the state of Oklahoma. But it is a narrative that we find really pleasing, and it is immensely enjoyable. And it marks a moment in time that's very specific. It's not just Larry that's dying this night. It's a time period that's dying.
Let's talk about the way that you found your way into playing Larry Hart. And you've done beautiful interviews about this. And in several of them, you talk about what it was to come up in the theater and to meet the great men of theater. And that this is both a love letter to Larry Hart specifically, but also to a whole kind of guy.
Well, and for me, the romanticism of the theater, the world of the theater that I kind of longed to be a part of as a young person. And when I was first working, a lot of the older great minds that would mentor me and that I admired so much had a lot in common with the Larry Hart of this movie, meaning, in this movie, it was illegal to be homosexual, and Larry Hart was closeted, and a lot of the men that I met had that same air, which is they didn't talk about sexuality, they found it vulgar, they were extremely erudite, extremely brilliant, extremely kind, and loving, but saw the theater as a holy calling. They didn't see it as a vocation. They saw it as a spiritual life. They cared so much about it. One of whom, late in his career, he worked here, Nicholas Martin, who I kind of want to say a special thanks to. He was one of my first directors, and he did an amazing production of Dead End that I saw here in Boston. And he was a beautiful man and a great teacher, and had no patience for an awkward sentence or a poor word choice or saying something that was derogatory about somebody else. He had such an astute mind. Well, you could be derogatory about somebody else if you were extremely funny. But it had to have wit to it, real wit. It couldn't just be mean. And I don't know, I saw a lot of Larry in that. And I don't know, from the first time I came across this piece of writing, I just wanted to play it so badly. And I think it has to do with my love of Nikki and other mentors that I had.
I thought of Nikki so much. I got to work with Nikki twice when I was 24 and 26
So cool.
years old at the Huntington. And one of the things that stood out to me about that is listening to interviews. People will talk to you about Larry's self-hatred and self-loathing, which is absolutely there. I mean, one of my favorite lines of the movie is, "My back looks like a bed sheet someone's thrown up on." But knowing these men and knowing people like Nikki, there's also just this severe self-regard that they have. And I feel like you capture that so beautifully in the film.
Well, thanks. We made a documentary about Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, and for me, that was a great way to study my own profession. And there was something that Newman talked about the correlation of opposites, that what makes a great character is when two opposites are in play. The most obvious example would be Marlon Brando, who's extremely masculine and extremely feminine. And it creates this strange teeter-tottering effect. Or Zero Mostel, who is a very large man who is also extremely graceful. And you almost can't take your eyes off him, almost like a spinning top, where you just, is it gonna fall, is it gonna fall, is it gonna fall? And Larry Hart was self-loathing and would say, and held himself in extreme high regard. He's a homosexual, he's in love with a woman. He's the smallest person in the room and he's the largest person in the room. Almost every thing I had to play in the movie, I could play the opposite, and that would be true as well. And it's this great correlation of opposites that creates a very dynamic character if you can get the balance.
Let's talk about your collaborator on this film, the incredible Richard Linklater, that you've worked with. You were saying that you've had 9 collaborations, but also many, many more. Will you talk about?
Well, strangely, I met Rick. He came to see me in a play in 1993, I think, and I had a little theater company that I was running, and one of the guys in the cast named Anthony Rapp was in Dazed and Confused. And why is that funny? curious. Anyway, it can be a private joke to yourself, I guess. But anyway,
I think because he's so famous.
Oh, okay, good. Anyway, so Rick came to see Anthony, and so Slacker had come out, but Dazed and Confused hadn't come out yet. And I'm from Austin, and I had a particular eye on the film Slacker. I really felt that there was a injustice in the universe that I wasn't in that film, which would get even more painful when I finally saw Dazed and Confused. But we went out and we started talking, and we really talked until 4:30 that morning, just walking up and down New York. And I kind of feel like we've been talking for about 32 years, and every now and then that conversation spits out a movie. But that's what it's felt like. He's, as I said earlier, he is very, what's the right word for it? He's agnostic in regards to subject matter. He's extremely interested in science, extremely interested in sports, interested in intellectual pursuits and silliness. And he's really wonderful friend because he's so curious and so loving of the world. And he's really fun to talk to about things, really curious mind. So it's just fascinating to me that this subject would be interesting to him. He made a movie called Me and Orson that was written by Robert Kaplow. And so when they were making that movie, I got to know Robert a little bit. And Robert, he teaches high school English, and he is a professor, and he loves this time period. And he worked on this script forever. And we would do readings of it every couple of years. We would read it out loud, and Rick would say, oh, how's that going to work? And how could that work? And it was almost like a rose bush that we just kind of pruned over a decade. Because the movie is real time, it's not going to be made in the editing room. You can't invert scenes. You can't cut one scene out. It's like trying to line up a string of dominoes so they each hit. And Rick knew it had to work in the writing and in the rehearsal process. And so, and we'd gone through this with the Before trilogy too, that, there's extremely long takes in these films. And so I don't know how to sing the song of praise about Richard Linklater. That's enough. I love the guy, so. And he keeps hiring me, so that's probably why I like him.
Take us back to that first conversation you had about this piece of material. What captured your imagination about it? What captured his? What is still there from that kernel of the idea?
It's a howl into the night. I think there's a lot of portraits of artists in the world, but this one where he's being left behind. I mean, it's almost, to me, it felt as if we're meeting Lennon and McCartney the last time they spoke to each other, and one of them is about to start a band 5 times bigger than the Beatles, and the other's going to die. The stakes are so heightened, and there's something about their music, for those that know it, that it's so melancholy and funny. It's profound and silly. It's such a strange combination of music. And Rick had this idea of, what if the movie was a 90-minute Rodgers and Hart song? And he had this idea that basically, like, he would be Rodgers and kind of build the skeleton and the musculature that this could lay on. And then my job was the lyrics. And I just had to learn these lines, and that we had to kind of, and it was wonderful that we had this character of the piano player in the movie who was going to score the whole movie. We knew that, like, this whole movie is going to be scored by him, that guy right over there, whatever. So what's the right song to play under the coat check scene? What's the right song to play under this? And it would be wall-to-wall music, and it should feel like a Rodgers and Hart song. And that was our goal, to kind of capture that wit and melancholy.
And then how does it build over the time? What do you remember about the discoveries that sort of...
Well, it's strange to have all the tools that you normally use as a performer taken away from you. If like, I'm just shy of 6 feet, and so I have ways in which I think it's interesting to flirt with a woman. And that's taken away from me. I have to look up, and that's weird. And a lot of, and Rick has worked with me. So when we started the movie, he was very intense with me, and he said, "This movie will be as good as you make it." And he said, "And it's really important, if I see you at all, the movie will be cute. And I hate cute movies. So you have to disappear." And he's edited me, so he spent years of his life editing my performances. And so it didn't matter whether I was making the crew laugh or having a good time or anything. He was always just looking at me going, I saw you, which starts to hurt your feelings. If I see you means it's bad, it starts to hurt your feelings. And but I understood the task, which was to completely disappear and to try to channel these men that I cared so much about. And so that was the discovery. It was absolutely exhausting. We had 15 days to make the film. So it was like we had 10 years to prepare, but 15 days to actually do it. And what Rick kind of meant was so much relied on my verbiage that how far we got each day depended on how sharp I was and whether he was happy with what I was doing.
And you have these massive monologues that you had to memorize and
Yeah, that's my job. The memorization part is like, that just takes time. But the thing that was really hard is trying to be inside the period, try to be inside Larry's body. There was a lot of, there's a lack of confidence that I think that he needed to have. It's weird to play somebody who's, a lot of people are like this, when they're extremely arrogant. The thing you know about them is if anybody's that arrogant, they're probably deeply insecure, right? And so I had to hit both those notes all the time. That was difficult. And the wit, the thing about memorizing this that was so fun was the script is so funny. I would sit there and just giggle myself to sleep, trying to learn all these lines. But I also knew there was this kind of guillotine over my head that I was going to let my great friend down if I didn't get to page 17 on the first day. I swear, I had more like lines my first day of shooting than I think I had cumulative of the last 5 years of acting. So.
I can't resist the opportunity to talk about the Before trilogy a little bit more. Is anyone with me on that? Truly some of my most favorite movies of all time. And then I have a very, very special place in my heart for Waking Life, which was one of the first dates I ever went on, was to the Esquire Theater in Denver to see Waking Life.
You guys dropped acid?
Oh my God. I wish we had, but we did fall in love. But I'm just curious about when you follow a character for so many years, and then you've made a complete thing about it. Do you still sometimes stare out the window on a Sunday afternoon and go, that's a Jesse thought, or what would Celine say about that?
It's kind of like a shadow self, particularly because Julie and I were co-writing those with Rick, that I kind of had a notebook in my brain about things that were right for the Before trilogy for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So much so that even after the last one was over, as I went, my eyes started to go, and I need glasses for the first time, and I thought, oh, in the new Before movie, Jesse will have glasses. You're like, oh, this would be happening to Jesse. Everything that was developmental, So it was a big, big part of my life, and it's where I learned how to talk in front of the camera. A lot of movies don't have dialogue the way that Linklater sees dialogue is part of the toolkit of cinema. And a lot of directors don't. When you think a lot of your favorite directors, you don't think of dialogue. You think of editing or stylistic shots or things. But Rick really loves dialogue. And so I was 24 when we did Before Sunrise, and I would have these, 3-page monologues. And so that aspect of Blue Moon was very familiar to me because I really learned how to do that. I'll tell you, my second day or something on the set of Before Sunrise, when I had my first really big speech, I was full of Stanislavski, and I had all these ideas about what good acting was, and I had secrets for my character and things in my pockets and all these things, and I was imagining what animal my character would be if he was an animal, and I had all these like kind of things. I was very passionate about acting, and I did this speech, and Rick said, "Cut." He was like, "That was really good. It looked like you were kind of moved when you said that one line. Why were you moved?" And I was like, "Well, it's kind of my secret, but and he's like, "Oh, you were acting." and I was like, "Yeah, I guess." He goes, "Yeah, don't do that." He's like, "'Cause see, if you start to act, then people will expect a plot. And my movies don't have any plot." And he said, "So what we have to do is do something else that makes them think they're not watching a movie. Because he was trying to say, if I go out to dinner with you, 3 hours can go by and it's perfectly engaging. Because I'm not expecting something else to happen. But if I'm expecting this Russian espionage team to arrive on a helicopter or, then I'm getting bored with all this talk, But so let's just have no acting." And it started what has become kind of the work of my life, is to figure out how to be in front of the camera and to simultaneously be and shape change yourself in ways that are not dramatic. This is, Blue Moon is a showier performance than I would generally enjoy. I have a joke, that I don't like to say it because if you say it, you don't get any awards, and we all like to get awards. But the truth is that I always feel like every time you get an award for acting, you lost. Because it means they know you're working. Yeah. And when you really do it well, it seems like it was easy. One of the things I like about the Before trilogy is people could say to me, like, "Hey, you just made that movie up, huh?" And we just killed ourselves, and we didn't just make it up. But it's easy like that. And it's part of Rick's charm is that he's allergic to anything that seems self-important. He's allergic to anything that's grandiose or patting itself on the back or has too much of a signature or anything like that. He just doesn't like that. And I love that about him. And what am I talking about?
I actually rewatched Before Midnight last night and hadn't seen it in years. And I was so moved by the way it ends. You just leave them at that bistro table next to the water in Greece and just slowly fade back. And it seemed so in conversation with the grace that you bring to the ending of this movie, that you've started it with him dying drunk in an alley. But that allows you this space, without romanticizing it, to end on this note. Will you talk about the ending of this movie?
It was hard won then. How to end this movie was really something, it was a riddle to us even as we started. There were a lot of different ideas about it. Because we know what's going to happen. There's not going to be a party at his place. The Golden Gate Quartet is not coming. And that poor flower boy is going to be there with 5 of his friends ringing the buzzer, and there's going to be nobody there because he's going to close Sardi's, and then he's going to go out drinking, But at this moment, because we know that he's just faced the firing squad and lost, we kind of wanted him to go out with some grace, some hope of how much fun he was to be with, and how much he loved to tell stories, and that we know the pain that's underneath it, but to just give Larry a moment to enjoy himself one last time, and tell the old Blue Moon story. In my mind, it's a story he probably told 1,000 times, right? And I don't know, and there's even something, Bobby Cannavale, we just kept talking about what could it be, because that part of bartenders that has to serve people that are drinking themselves to death, but it's really not up to you, and people have to have their own agency, and it seemed fraudulent in a way of Bobby was like, no more for you, Larry. Because Larry would just leave and drink somewhere else. And he's kind of trying to take care of him and let him drink in a safe spot. And everybody's gracing him with interest. But he is funny. I don't know, it seemed to have all the mysteries of Larry in it.
Yeah,
It's we had come up with this thing that was going to end with, he pours me a shot and I'd say, isn't it romantic? And he says, not really. It was going to cut to black. And we got to that in rehearsal and I was just like, I don't know, it's not right. And Rick was like, it's not right. What is it? And this is the value of the way that Rick works. We've been meditating on this so long that there was lines that we cut out 4 years ago. I was like, what if I do that Mankiewicz story, where he gets his name circumcised? Yeah. And Rick was like, yeah, that's funny. Where the hell's that draft? And we dug that draft out. And I was like, let's do the Blue Moon story here. And then we just kind of workshopped it. And then we workshopped it again the next night. And then Rick kind of makes the movie in his head. He just kind of sits there and watches and kind of goes, yeah, that's it. It's almost like watching somebody turn a Rubik's Cube in their brain, and then they do it. But that's how we came up with, and then Rick came up with the idea of kind of floating back. It's just kind of, I don't know, it works for some reason.
I find it so beguiling and moving, and thank you so much for this incredible performance. Thank you so much for this incredible afternoon.
I love this movie theater. Thank you guys for being here.
And thank you so much.
Thank you, Ella.